Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Now, recently I did a talk about an absolutely splendid film about Charles Ives that was part of this series, Dvorak's Prophecy, a new narrative for American classical music, based on the work and research and opinions of classical music taste person Joseph Horowitz, author of Understanding Toscanini and other entertaining tomes. Well, as part of that series, there were things about other composers because the idea of the series is to show that American music is not what the, traditional, first there was, the Romantics, and there was nothing in the U.S. before the First World War, and then there was the Second Viennese School and the academic serialists and Aaron Copland, and that was American music. I mean, that was kind of what they're saying. And Joseph Horowitz's point is no, there is actually another current in American music that's fascinating and that doesn't fit into the usual perspective or the usual assumptions about what classical music is or what the forms of classical music are. And one of those people was Charles Ives, of course, who was one of the earliest in this batch after Dvorak. Dvorak, well, he was contemporaneous, but a little bit after Dvorak, when Dvorak prophesied that there would be, American music had to be founded on indigenous music, which he considered to be Indian music and African American music and whatnot. Well, we all know the story, right? We know how that went. Didn't work, but Dvorak, Horowitz argues, was actually correct, and that there was, that in following up on his prophecy for what could make great American music, that music existed and exists. And I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that he feels has been neglected is the wonderful, wonderful legacy of film music, in particular, Bernard Herrmann. And so there is a movie about him. Thank goodness. It's wonderful. A wonderful idea, anyway. Beyond Psycho, the musical genius of Bernard Herrmann. Yeah. Cool stuff, really. I'm actually of two minds about this video because I am totally behind the concept. I mean, Herrmann was a genius. His film scores are full of absolutely amazing music. He also wrote concert music. And he also did, as Horowitz tries to insist, music for radio plays, which were really wonderful. And we only have examples, really, of one of them. And here it is. Because Joseph Horowitz's group, the Post-Classical Ensemble, recorded it under Angel Gil Ordóñez. And they did this thing, Whitman, the radio play by Norman Corwin of 1944. And there are a whole bunch of these suckers that Herrmann did, and it would be really good if we could get a series of them to get a sense of, his work in them generally. But it's a beautiful piece, and I reviewed the disc, and it also contains his clarinet quintet, Souvenir de Voyage, which is absolutely gorgeous, and Psycho, a narrative for string orchestra, which is the piece he put together. It's not the suite from Psycho. It's an independent concert work based on the music from Psycho, which is shaped to have an independent existence as basically a 15-minute long tone poem for strings. And it's just marvelous, as you can simply imagine, because the music for Psycho is terrific. So anyway, so here's the movie, which is on Naxos and is not free like the Ives was. The Ives was streaming for free for a while. Maybe it still is. I don't know. But this one is a separate independent thing that you get separately, and a separate thing you get separately. Yeah, okay. Terrible. And it functions to a degree as sort of like a big infomercial for the disc. And if you have the disc, which really does give you a beautiful portrait of Herrmann, because you've got a new discovery, this radio play, which is Whitman poetry with narration and set to music. It's beautiful. And I'm not a fan of spoken word, but this is beautiful. The clarinet quintet, which is a concert work, and the Psycho thing, which is a film arrangement. So you get a sense of Herrmann's range, and it was huge. I mean, he was a musical genius, unquestionably, and he was cranky and cantankerous. And they quote some of his stuff. They play a bit of an interview where someone says that a bit of his music for Wuthering Heights is in Vertigo, and he's like, no, it's not. Well, it sounds the same. He said, of course it sounds the same. He said, it's by me. It all sounds like me. So don't give me any crap about I'm borrowing this or that. It's just me being me, which I think was really, really wonderful reply to that accusation. And you've got here commentary by the conductor, Angel Gil Ordonez, and Joseph Horowitz himself, and all these other like supporting people, Whitman scholars, and you've got the critic Alex Ross, who is whose own work I think has done much to advance the cause. There's a tremendous body of American music that stands outside the normal confines of the classical orthodoxy that deserves attention. So he's in here, and William Sharp, who's the narrator, and for the Whitman thing, and other people like that. Now, the real question is this: the scope of this particular film is limited by the fact that they're working solely with the music on here. And however interesting this is, it does not really even begin to capture the range of Herrmann's genius as a composer for film and theater and other things, because of course we know. I mean, the wonderful thing about film music, and the reason we need to have a somewhat different way of evaluating greatness in music generally, is that he had to be able to write for anything, for any scenario, for any kind of person or place or atmosphere. He had to be a stylistic chameleon. The genius of Herrmann is that he had his own personal style, and he managed to do that, to express it, to be himself, while simultaneously wearing all of these different costumes, musically speaking, in trying to write music that suited the films. And he wrote 51 or 50 some odd film scores, which is really quite extraordinary, and music for television, and these radio plays. And I mean, we don't really even know, or at least in the popular imagination, nobody really knows the scope of what he did. And this is all addressed here. He was an amazing conductor. He conducted the CBS Symphony Orchestra, he was on radio, and he did all kinds of things. He really did. He was really a central figure. It's even better when he's right side up. He was really a central figure between the first half of the 20th century in American musical life, in broadcast media. So that's all addressed here, very interestingly. I could do without all the business about Whitman. I mean, they're really pushing this thing, the Whitman narrative, the music of which is just marvelous. It's beautiful. And of course the poetry is beautiful, but we really don't need a disquisition on Walt Whitman, I think. I mean, I didn't feel that was too necessary, because it took away from the focus on Bernard Herrmann, which is where I think it really ought to be. But as I said, they're limited by the fact that they only have so much music to choose from, and Whitman was the big discovery. Actually, I really think Horowitz claims that that this radio play business was sort of a unique medium. It's gone now, of course. It's totally gone. And it kind of begs the question about, how great can a composer be who is the best at something that nobody cares about anymore? It's a very, very interesting question, because there's no question that Herrmann was wonderful at it. But these radio plays, they're not as unusual or different as they seem, because what they really are is the electronic version of the classic melodrama. A melodrama is simply spoken words with musical accompaniment. I mean, there's one in Fidelio. Beethoven's Fidelio. They became very popular in the 19th century. I mean, the greatest melodrama composer was the Czech Zdeněk Fibich, probably, or at least the biggest, because he wrote Hippodamia, which is a big Wagnerian trilogy of Greek mythological storytelling, set to music over spoken words for 2 and some odd hours each one, and there are 3 of them. I have them sitting around here somewhere. And the point is, no one cares about them now. They really don't. They may be absolutely the greatest, grandest, most magnificent examples, those highly developed, melodramas in existence. But it just isn't a kind of music that people have much interest in anymore. And so, film music is a wonderful example of extended melodrama as often as not, because you have musical accompaniment, people are talking over it. So there you go. It's still with us. And these radio plays are part and parcel of that, and of a very, very, very long tradition of spoken word accompanied by music. So Herrmann is not as out there as you think. The fact that there was a special, perhaps, sort of American version of this is a very interesting fact. But we need to know more. We need to hear more. And I'm hoping that, in the fullness of time, Herrmann's music for radio and other media, aside from film, will get more attention, because we need to see, like any great composer, and I don't think there's any question he was a great composer, we need to be able to perceive him whole. And this film begins a process, I would say. It's not like the Ives movie, which I think gave a very nicely rounded portrait of Ives in general and what his achievement was and what his intentions were. Herrmann is much more complicated than that. He really is. And it seems like the materials are not available in order to really create a rounded portrait of the man and as, the man as heard through his music, through the full range of his music. And so this is not as satisfying, I think, as the Ives film, but it's still extremely interesting and extremely important, because it gives Herrmann the credit he deserves for being one of the great American musical geniuses of the 20th century. I mean, there's no question about that, is there? So keep on listening, friends, and watching. Take care.